This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ranger Sara, and I've been the director of the Lake Superior Maritime Visitor Center in Duluth for a little over a year. I spent the previous 5 years as a park ranger here. And believe it or not, I didn't know a lot about boats when I first started working here. My background is in museum collections, and most of my experience has been working with Native American collections. So you might be asking yourself, well, how did I end up here? Well, my husband has been a boat nerd for a long time, and he actually was the one who introduced me to these giant boats and planted the seed of us moving up to the Twin Ports area. We both grew up in Wisconsin and spent a lot of time on Lake Michigan and the southern shore of Lake Superior. We ended up visiting the Twin Ports a few times, and I saw a job announcement at the visitor center. I applied, I made it to the interview, and that's how I ended up here. I've been spending the past 6 years learning from my coworkers and a lot of the visitors that stop by and just independently. And I found that I really enjoy telling people about Great Lakes shipping and the port and what the Corps of Engineers does to support this industry. The photo on your right is actually my first boat photo that I've ever taken, and I don't remember taking it, but this was in 1997, and it was somewhere in upstate New York. And the vessel is the Algo North, and I did a little bit of research in preparing for this program about the Algo North, and I found out a cool thing about it, that it was the first ship that was outfitted with a module that filters invasive species from ballast water, and that was installed in 1997, the same year that photo was taken. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Anyway, so we will start our program here. We are going to cover a couple of terms during the program, so I just wanted to identify those for you before we got started. We're going to talk about the pilot house. The pilot house is the location on the boat where all the navigation and communication happen. And it's where the captain of the vessel, the wheelsman and watchman work. You can see in the top picture, that's an interior photo of the pilot house with all the navigation equipment. And then if you look on the bottom pictures, these are two different pilot houses. They look really different, but they do serve the same function to provide a lot of visual information for the pilots and people that work on the vessels. So the pilot house on the left is from the Arthur M. Anderson, and that is in the front of the boat. And the pilot house on the right is from the Manitoulin, which is in the rear of the boat. So they look different, but they serve the same function. The next terms we'll discuss are bow and forward. So the bow is the front of the vessel on the outside, and forward means the front of the vessel within the ship. Stern and aft are both opposite of bow and forward. Stern is the rear of the vessel on the outside, and aft is towards the back of the vessel within the ship. We'll talk a little bit about hatch covers and cargo holds. The photo on the right, those rectangular shapes in the middle of the boat, those are hatch covers. And if you take those hatch covers off, the photo on the left is what you'll see. Those are cargo holds with iron ore pellets inside of them. And so today we're going to be focusing on 5 different ship styles, and we're going to talk about traditional style Lakers, which have been operating since the 1870s. So we've had this style since back then, but the ones that are currently operating on the lakes have been built in the 1940s. So these are a little bit older designs than some of the other classifications. The Seaway River class is a newer classification that started in the mid 1960s. 1,000-footers started a little bit later than the Seaway River class in the mid or early 70s. Integrated tug barges started being built in the mid 70s. And Salties are another vessel that have been around for a long time, but the ones that we see that are currently operating have been built in the late 90s and later. Before we go any further, I'd like to just find out a little bit about the audience. If you could use your chat function and just let me know if you've ever seen a Great Lakes cargo vessel. It could be anywhere, but if you just want to let me know if you've seen one, and if you'd like to, you can tell me where you've seen them before. I'll just take a minute or two for you to put that in the chat. Someone has seen them every day, almost every day. Another person has seen lots of them in this harbor and this North Shore ports. Someone has seen pretty much all of them. Well, good. So it sounds like some of you have some, at least, knowledge of what these vessels do. Okay, the first one we'll talk about today are traditional Lakers. Traditional Lakers are based off the design from the R.J. Hackett, which was built in 1870. They have a forward pilot house and another structure at the rear of the vessel, with the cargo holds located in the middle. The oldest surviving traditional Laker is the Alpina, which was built in 1942. It's one of 5 steamships left out there. The other 4 are the Arthur M. Anderson, Philip R. Clark, Case and J. Calloway, and Wilfred Sykes. These vessels are self-unloaders, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail at the next slide. And yeah, so a lot of them didn't start out as being self-unloaders, but this technology was added in the future, or not the future, but added later. So with the unloading systems, these systems are located underneath their cargo holds. A lot of boats have cargo holds that are shaped in a V or a W position, so the cargo naturally falls down to the bottom of that. And then underneath those holds, there are hoppers that can be opened by crew members that allow the cargo to fall onto a conveyor belt, which is located below the holds. So that conveyor system moves to the back of the vessel, where it kind of sandwiches the cargo between 2 belts and brings it up to the self-unloading boom. And this was developed after World War II, once most of the natural iron rock had been mined. They developed a new type of pellet called taconite pellets or iron ore pellets. So those were round pellets that were really easy to roll, so they worked really well with these unloading systems found in the vessels. And the boom is typically located on top of the vessel, and we'll talk about a couple that aren't located in that position. Most of them are between 250 and 260 feet long, and these can be moved to either side of the vessel so they can unload their own cargo. So it makes them really easy for vessels to unload by themselves. The Roger Blough is one of those strange cases. Kind of think of this vessel as a transitional vessel. It's 848 feet long, so it's a little bit longer than some of the traditional Lakers, but it's not quite long enough to be a different class of vessel, which is a 1,000-footer. However, it is 105 feet wide, so it's a kind of a wide boat, and the Laker or the 1,000-footers are 105 feet wide as well, so that they're the same width of a 1,000-footer, but they're not quite as long. And the Roger Blough has a unique unloading system. The boom comes out from her stern, from inside her stern, and because she has a specialized unloader, it only works at U.S. Steel locations in Gary, Indiana, and South Chicago, Illinois, and also Kano, Ohio. The next class we'll talk about are the Seaway and River class Lakers, and these really started getting a lot of traction once the St. Lawrence Seaway opened in 1979. So these are shorter vessels. They are, there's one area in the system, the Seaway system between Lakes Erie and Ontario. It's called the Welland Canal. It bypasses Niagara Falls. And that area has about 8 different locks. And so they have a size restriction of 740 feet. So these vessels have to be underneath or shorter than that length in order to either come from the ocean and get to the other interlakes, or to get from Duluth and go out into the ocean. So that's where one of the linchpins is in the system. The oldest Seaway River class laker that is operating right now is the Tim S. Duel, built in 1967. You can see that their pilot house is in the rear of the vessel. They've got a self-unloading boom on their deck. The American Merchant Marine Act of 1970 funded a lot of new ships, so that was a big boom in the shipbuilding industry. And they're also referred to as river class because a lot of the ports that are around the Great Lakes are located in rivers off the Great Lakes. So these boats are easily maneuverable and work well in the river systems. The next class we'll talk about are the 1,000-footers. These started being built in the early 70s. In 1968, the Poe lock at the Soo locks opened, and that is the only lock there that can allow the 1,000-foot vessels to travel through them. The Poe lock is located at Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, which is on the other end of Lake Superior from us. So that's the only way that the vessels can get into or out of Lake Superior is through the Soo locks, and the Poe lock is the only one that can accommodate the 1,000-footers. The Stuart J. Court on the right was the first 1,000-footer built in 1972. This one has sort of a complicated build history. It was built in multiple parts in multiple locations and put together in Erie, Pennsylvania. The second 1,000-footer that was built also has a bit of a complicated history that we'll talk about in a few minutes. The other 11 that were built were either built in one of 2 locations, either Bay Ship at Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, or Lorain, Ohio, American Shipbuilding Company at Lorain, Ohio. So there are currently 13 1,000-foot vessels operating on the Great Lakes, and we see a lot of these come into the Twin Ports. This picture identifies 2 other 1,000-footers. On the left is the James R. Barker, on the right is the Walter J. McCarthy Jr. You can see a couple of subtle differences between these two. On the left, the Barker's pilot house is located in the back on top of the crew quarters and other things in the back stack here. It's located on the same area of the vessel as the Walter J. McCarthy, but the McCarthy's you can see is a lot wider. So the McCarthy's pilot house actually stretches the whole length or the whole width of the vessel. So, and that was a safety feature that was developed a little bit later in the design. So the watchman can look down at the edge of the pilot house and actually see the edge of the boat. So before, with these narrower pilot houses, they weren't necessarily able to do that. And then next we will talk about integrated tug barges, which is, I think, kind of a interesting category of boats. These are basically what they sound like. So they consist of an unpowered barge that's into the back. They're more economical because there's only the powered tug that requires less crew to man. So they've been classified differently by the Coast Guard than the other traditional lake boats. They can be self-sufficient because the tug can actually break free from the barge, as you can see in this bottom picture with Thompson. And it can fuel if the barge is loading or unloading, or it can break ice for the barge. So it's got a lot of uses that way. It's also a creative reuse of older ships. In the case of the photo on the left here is the barge is the Joseph H. Thompson and the tug is the Joseph H. Thompson Jr. The barge was actually used in World War II, and once it ended service, it was brought back for use on the Great Lakes. So it was cut down a little bit and then fitted with this tug so that it could be used to haul cargo. One disadvantage of this system is because it's only powered by the tug, there's a little bit less horsepower and it requires more fuel than some of the other vessels. But it is good. It's a good navigator, and it works well in some of the rivers and some of the more narrow parts of the Great Lakes. A PResque Isle is a unique case. It is the second 1,000-foot vessel built, but it is also an integrated tug barge. You can see in the picture on the top right, that's the picture of the tug. It looks a little strange and almost a little bit cumbersome trying to drive that around without the barge, without it pushing the barge. This one is classified differently by the Coast Guard than some of the other ones, in that since, I think it's because the tug, it wasn't supposed to necessarily operate independently of the barge, that it required more staff than, or more crew than some of the other integrated tug barges. This was also a complicated build in that it was assembled, or the pieces were built in different places and they were all brought together into Erie, Pennsylvania to be assembled into one vessel. All right, next we will talk about Salties. Salties are the newest boats. As you can see, the LB Borg built in 2011 and BBC Russia in 2018. Some of them have cranes on their deck, but not all of them, as you can see with the LB Borg example. The BBC Russia is arriving, bringing in wind turbine blades that you can see on her deck. So those cranes are really useful to help her load and unload that heavy machinery. Typically, the Salties come here. Sometimes they will bring in equipment like the wind turbine components or other project equipment, but they most always leave with grain. The top picture on the left, you can see these are hydraulic hatch covers. Instead of the ones that are on the Lakers that are just lifted off, these are hydraulic, so they'll fold up, allowing the cargo to be put into the holds. And then in this next picture, this next slide, we'll talk a little bit about one of the more unique features of the Salties, which is the bulbous bow. And you can see that really well in the Federal Pioneer photo on the left bottom. The Mottler also has a bulbous bow, but it's hidden underwater. So that's why they have these symbols. They look like kind of a lowercase b filled in sometimes, depending on what side of the boat you're looking at. So that indicates to other passing vessels that there is this protrusion underneath the water, which could be important. The Mottler has also seen its share of salt water, so you can see how the rust impacts the vessels and can cause deterioration a lot quicker than fresh water. We'll go through some of the more frequent companies that we see in some of their fleet and stack colors. American Steamship Company vessels come here a lot. They are typically all black. They've got black hulls with the white structures on top, and they have, if you look at the smokestack, it's black, silver, red, and red. So that identifies it as American Steamship Company. The next one is a Great Lakes fleet, and you can see it, the vessels are colored red, black, gray, and white, and it's got the black and gray smokestack at the back. This is a Interlake Steamship Company vessel. It's a all red vessel with a black smokestack with an orange stripe through it. Central Marine Logistics is also a red vessel with a white line across the top and some gray markings on their pilot house. Inland Lakes Management is a different color vessel. It's sort of like a tannish color. They've got their ILM logo and then the black, silver, and red smokestack. Andre is another fleet or company, shipping company. they have a lot of tugs and a couple of integrated tug barges. This vessel, the tug is the Spartan and the barge is Spartan 2. And this is a unique vessel because it hauls liquid cargo. So it's one of only a couple of vessels that bring liquid cargo into this harbor, and that would be calcium chloride. So we don't really get to see them very often, but it's kind of fun when we do. And then also the Venkovart Tug and Barge Company has integrated tug barges. These are different colors. So the Erie Trader here is black, but the Joyce L. Venkovart that we saw on the integrated tug barge side is red. And then Rand Logistics has 2 branches, one in the US, Grand River Navigation, and one a Canadian flag branch, which is Lower Lakes Towing. These vessels look similar. They're all gray with, some of them have the red line separating the gray and white background. These 2 vessels are kind of unique too because they have their self-unloading boom in the front of the vessel instead of the back like most of them typically have. It's another identifying characteristic. So I forgot to mention before that the American fleets have about 76 active vessels in about 10 different shipping companies. Canadian vessels, there are about 73 Canadian vessels in 5 fleets. I can't remember what I said with the American vessels, but I think there are about 45 or 46 total vessels operating on the lakes. One of the major shipping companies in Canada is the Canada Steamship Lines. You can see their logo flag right there. And these are all red vessels. And then Algoma Central is another major Canadian shipping company, and they've got the bear logo and dual tone colored vessels with white on top. And now let's talk about some of the other symbols that you see on ships. On the right here is a ruler, and that is the draft line. So you can see wherever the water line is, that's how much vessel you have underneath the water. So according to this boat, there's about 17 feet of water or 17 feet of boat underneath the water. The midway on the left has that same rule. And then she also's got a bulbous bow that you can see. And then this other symbol we'll talk about in a minute. I wanted to go back to the picture on the right where you can see the AB with the diamond and the line through it. That is called a plimsoll line. So that is the line where the water line when a vessel is fully loaded in normal conditions. The markings on the left indicate other types of conditions, like if they're in salt water is more buoyant than fresh water, so that'll change where the boat sits in the water. And also cold water is more buoyant than warm water, so that changes how the boat will sit in water in those conditions. And with the case of the midway, you can see that it has a different color, the color red at the water line and the black color on top of that. It's not necessarily for branding or aesthetics, but it's a different kind of chemical composition in the paint, which helps it to hold up better when it's immersed in water. And then another important symbol that we'll talk about are for the bow and stern thrusters. If you look at the bottom picture on the left here, that's the symbol for the either bow or stern thrusters. Looks like a little propeller. And the bow and stern thrusters are located either in the front or the back of the vessel. Sometimes vessels have both. And they're just inset propellers that help the vessel turn and maneuver a little bit easier. Finally, we've got a couple of little clues on the American century. You can see that she's got her name in the back of the vessel and Wilmington, Delaware. Wilmington, Delaware is not necessarily where she's from or where she was built, but it is her port of registry, which means that's where the company paid the taxes and fees to have her registered. You can also see her American Steamship Company stacks on top of the vessel. And then on the right, we've got the Trigartha, which is another vessel that was involved in World War II, and when she came back, she was fitted out for Great Lakes Cargo Service. Oops, excuse me. And she displays her battle ribbons on her boat. So it's always fun to see her come in and look at those ribbons from her involvement in the war. So let's talk a little bit about why the ship styles have changed. We discussed some of these changes in previously in the program. So cargo is one big thing. So with the development of iron ore pellets, which you can see on the left here, those made it really easy to use the self-unloading booms and had the cargo roll right off of that. Geography is another factor. So we've got the Welland Canal. The top left picture is a picture of some of the actual locks in the Welland Canal. So that presents the length restriction. So vessels that need to go into the ocean or into the Great Lakes from the ocean have to be underneath or shorter than that 740-foot length. Economy also dictates style changes. Adding that self-unloading boom made it a lot more economical, a lot quicker to unload their own cargo. And safety, like we talked about, the pilot houses that stretch across the entire width of the boat where they can see down the sides. Technology also helps or dictates some of the changes in boats. Once new technology is developed, you can see that coming out in boat styles. And then ownership changes can change colors or names of vessels. So next we are going to do a little quiz, see what you've learned. So I'm going to show you a couple of pictures, and they're each going to have these 5 styles written on them, so you don't have to remember those. And I'm going to have you use the chat function with the next few photos that are coming out, and tell me which style you think it is. And pay attention to its identifiable shapes, where the structures are located on the vessel, and what are some of the other markings that you see. So in addition to the classification, you can also let me know if it has any thrusters or if it's got a bulbous bow, or and even if you know the name or the shipping company, that would be amazing too. So this first picture I'm going to put up here. Take a couple minutes and take a look at it, see what you can tell me from it. Use the classifications listed on the left and let me know what you think that is. Some of you guessed the name correct. One of you guessed the name correctly. Oh, I didn't block it out on the other side. You can kind of see it over there. Yes, this is a 1,000 footer. It's actually 1,016 and a half feet. It's the longest vessel on the Great Lakes, the Trigartha. And she is from Interlake Steamship Company. Some of you guessed that based on her smokestacks. And she's got a bow thruster and her plimsoll marks. The Trigartha is a frequent visitor to the Twin Port. She comes here about once a week. So that is the Trigartha of Interlake Steamship Company. And what about this next one? What do you think that is? Take a look at where the structures are and the shape, and let me know what you think. Okay, a lot of you are guessing traditional laker, and that is correct. You'll notice the pilot house in the front of the vessel and another structure in the rear. And she is a self-unloader. You can see her boom on top. Someone guessed Canadian vessel. No bow thruster, right? There's no symbol for the bow thruster. This is the Midship of Cotton, which is a Canadian vessel and a traditional style laker. She is 698 feet long, so she could also be one of the river class or Seaway class vessels as well. Midship of Cotton entered service in 1952. Okay, here's our third boat that you're gonna guess. Take a look at where the structures are and any other markings on the boat that you can see. If you can see which shipping company she belongs to, you can put that in there also. Okay, a lot of you guessed this one correctly. This one was a 1,000-footer. It's the Mossavi Miner for Interlake Steamship Company. She's got her bow thruster. This one is 1,004 feet in length, and she entered service in 1977. I think she was built right after the James R. Barker, so this would be the 4th 1,000-footer built. All right, what about this next one? Take a look at where her structures are, what kind of symbols she has, and the color gives away the shipping company pretty well. All right, well, a lot of you know your stuff. This is a traditional style laker, and it could also be a Seaway River class laker. This is the Arthur M. Anderson, built in 1952, measuring 647 feet in length. Tom says she was lengthened to 767, so we may have to check my data here. But yes, she is a Great Lakes Fleet vessel with a bow thruster in front. Okay, so she was lengthened to 767. So this wouldn't be a river class or Seaway river class laker. She's the traditional style laker. Thank you for that information. This next vessel should be kind of easy if you've been paying attention. Take a look at what she's got on her deck. That will give you a good clue as to what kind of vessel she is too. Yep, this one is a Salty. You can see from some of the rust, and she's got cranes on her deck. She's got a big pilot house and structure in the back, and she's carrying wind turbine components, her wind energy components. She does not, I don't see the bulbous bow symbol, but there's a little Can't tell what that symbol is, but she may or may not have a bulbous bow. And yes, she's only 452 feet long, so she can fit easily through the Welland Canal and through the rivers. She entered in service in 1997, and she sails under the flag of Netherlands. And just a note about the Salties and where they are flagged, they use the same kind of system where they will register their boats in the same place, or they'll pay the taxes and the fees at the place they register the vessel. So they're often looking for the place that has the fewest fees or the cheapest taxes to register their boats, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's where they're from or where they are going to. What about this next one? This one should be pretty easy as well, with the location of the structures, and you can tell the company with the stack. So give me your guesses for this one. Yep. This one is the traditional style Laker, the John G. Munson, yes, Great Lakes Fleet. And let's see what else. She's got, she's an unloader, but her unloader is in the front of the vessel. Another unique feature of this vessel. She's 767 feet in length. So she is traditional style, but will not fit through the Welland Canal. She entered service in 1952. All right, and finally, let's see what's on the horizon for boat designs. There's a couple new vessels that are being built for U.S. cargo service. And it's been a while since a new vessel was built for the U.S. It's been since about the 1980s, 1981 or so, when the Trigartha was built. That was the last one built for in the U.S., or excuse me, in the Great Lakes, built in the Great Lakes for the Great Lakes service. The one on the left is a barge that will be fitted with a tug for the Venkovart Tug and Barge Company. This is a 740-foot barge built at Midship in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. She's supposed to be entering service in the middle of this year, but I haven't seen any recent updates as to when she'll be starting service. She'll actually be working with the tug, the Dirk S. Venkovart, which we've seen in a picture before, but it was named the Joseph H. Thompson Jr. So the Joseph H. Thompson Jr. tug was rebuilt and renamed the Dirk S. Venkovart, and that tug will work with this barge, which is going to be called the Michigan Trader. The vessel that you see on the right is a new 639-foot vessel for Interlake Steamship Company, and because of its size, this one will be used in for the river trade as well. The Cuyahoga River has a lot of Great Lakes cargo shipping, so this one will be used in that area. This one will be called the Mark R. Barker, and just a little note on some of the names of boats. A lot of the vessels that have proper names, like names after people, are named after important people in their shipping company. So Mark Barker is the president of the Interlake Steamship Company, so he's getting a vessel named after him. And so the vessel on the left, what is that classification going to be when that is complete? Is it going to be a traditional style Laker, a salty, an integrated tug barge, 1,000-footer, or the river class? Yes, she will be the tug barge. And what about the one on the right? When it's complete. Think about her size, where she can fit. What classification will she have? Will it be 1,000-footer, traditional, salty? Yes, it's a river class. She's built to work on the rivers. Good job. So with all these vessels, the story is really written on the boat. If you pay attention to what you see on the vessel, they will tell you a lot about who they are. So it's important to understand like how the shipping industry is changing and how vessels also, the design of vessels also change with the times to become safer or to keep up with new technologies and new advances in loading and unloading. And it helps you better understand these vessels that you might see either when you visit our visitor center in the Twin Ports or the Sul Lacs Visitor Center in Sault Ste. Marie or anywhere along the Great Lakes where you can see vessels. And next time when you bring your friends and family down here, you can impress them with your vast knowledge of these vessels and the companies that run them. And then finally, I just have a little bit of more information where you can find more information about the boats. A lot of the shipping companies that are listed have a pretty good social media presence. So Facebook or Twitter, they might have accounts on Facebook and Twitter that'll keep you updated on new vessels that they might be building. Boatnerd.com is a great resource, and it also has a great information search. So you can type out questions there, and it's full of boat nerds, so they can help you they can help answer your questions. And they also have a lot of information on the ships that are currently working on the Great Lakes. Also, a book called Know Your Ships is a great guide to have when you're boat watching. So that is the end of the presentation. I'm going to turn it back over to Trisha. She's going to give you an update on our visitor centers, and then we will answer questions in a few minutes.
All right, thank you so much, Sarah, for that presentation. Let me get my slide to work here. Okay, so just to give everybody an update of what the two visitor centers have been doing, the Lake Superior Maritime Visitor Center and then the Sul Lacs Visitor Center. So as far as us here in Duluth, we've been doing departure and arrival announcements. We have a cell phone tour, which we've added more stops onto for the public to use on their phone, as well as listening to audio and some pictures. We have our little table set up, as you see in the picture there, for outdoor guest services, and now we have an outdoor gift shop around the corner as well, and a little tent. So that was able to get up and running. For the Sul Lacs Visitor Center, there's exhibits installed in the park, the vessel arrival and departure announcements as well, and as you can see in the picture on the left, outdoor guest services as well. And at the bottom, as it's indicated, visitor centers will be open when they comply with health standards for federal and state and local. Also, I wanted to show you what's coming up next week. So as I mentioned earlier, Western Lake Superior Lighthouses by former LSMVC Director Tom Holden will be happening next week. And then on the right here is the links to find out more for those Facebook pages if you're looking for the recording. Someone asked for that earlier. And then our respective association pages. And if you'd like to ask any more questions or submit a request for future programs, you can email us as well. And then I would also like if any of you can take about 3 minutes to take our survey at the end, that would be great as well. So I'm going to keep this up for the question portion. Feel free to copy and paste some of those links, but otherwise feel free to put in some questions in our chat function and Sarah can answer those for you now. Sarah, if I don't know if you are able to see this question, but there's a question saying, what is Sarah's favorite boat? Sarah, I'm not sure if we can hear you. Are you able
Sorry,
to
I
hear
was
me?
muted.
Okay.
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
My favorite vessel is the James R. Barker, and it's kind of a weird reason, but it's because of the horn. It's got a really unique two-toned horn that I just love to hear. And I also think it was the first vessel that we ever saw when we first visited the Twin Ports. So that's my favorite one. I saw a question up there about what actually connects the tug to integrated barge and how does it handle big seas going up and down. I don't know exactly. I just did a little bit of quick research here, and it looks like, I mean, they call it a special connection system, and I'm not sure what that means, but that's something that we can look into a little bit more. It's a good question that we can find out a little bit more information about. But there is a notch that's in the barge, so somehow they fit in there and connect and are able to work together. But I'll do a little bit more research on that and see if we can find a better answer for that one.
I'll just give everybody a minute or two to submit any final questions.
There
I
is,
did also, go ahead.
I was just going to add a little bit to the integrated tug barge answer. So it's got an articulated connection, which means that they can still move a little bit independently of each other. I'm not explaining this correctly, but so the tug can move a little bit independently from the barge, so that when they do encounter high seas, they're not this piece of boat that can't move. I'm not explaining this well at all, but they can. I'll look into it. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Sounds good. Well, you did a great presentation regardless. I also posted the survey link in the chat function as well if you'd like to copy that. Awesome. Looks like we don't have any other questions, so I'm going to conclude this program. Again, thank you all for joining us today, and we hope to see you next week again at 11:30 a.m. Central or 12:30 Eastern. And stay safe and enjoy your weekends. Thank you.